Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lindsay, and you can find out more about us on our Facebook page, The Wonderful World of Wine, and find past episodes on SoundCloud. Hi there, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. You know, every week Mark and I get together and we talk about articles that are related to the wine industry, wine sciences, current trends in the wine world. And we both have a really good time doing a lot of this research, but we don't usually talk about these things ahead of time. So the first time that we get to sort of sit down and debate and discuss really is when we are talking about these things on air for all of you. So it's fun for us because it really just is how we ordinarily communicate anyway. You know, we like to debate and we like to throw different ideas at each other and see what each other's opinions are about. So for us, this show is a whole lot of fun and is a great extension of all of the classes and education that we do. Yeah, and then we've also got some ideas about what do we Google during the week? You know, what are we actually looking into researching? What is top of mind, front of mind for us? So what kind of things were you curious about or researching about this week, Mark?
Well, Kim, this week, it's rosé season.
Already, again.
It's coming, so
I know.
We have to put in our orders early for spring.
Yeah.
But one of the requests I got was for a new rosé that was out, and I'm not sure you heard of it or not, but it's called JNSQ, Je ne sais quoi.
Oh, okay.
And it's a California rosé, so I did a little research. It's actually going to retail in the upper $20 range, that's why I did the research.
Okay.
Why is it? And it comes in this French glass perfume bottle.
Ooh,
so I think the consumers are going to pay for the packaging. But they're doing great social media campaigns with great graphics, so that's what I Googled.
This isn't the Sarah Jessica Parker rosé, is it?
I thought there was something linked with her.
Yeah, she's got apparently like a wine line
she's
coming
not on
out
the
too.
site.
Okay,
Yeah, so.
well, maybe that's not available in Massachusetts yet. I don't know.
And their tagline was California born with French accent. So interesting.
All right. So stay tuned, folks.
What about you? What did you Google yourself?
I Googled, everybody knows I'm a wine geek, and I love grape varieties and what are the genetics of different grape varieties. So I like figuring out okay, this grape variety, its parents are this grape and this grape. And you can kind of see how they were combined by biologists that they developed a new grape variety. So I kind of get all geeky about that. So I was doing research about the Torrontés grape and I learned what its parentage is. And Torrontés, apparently, this is pretty cool, was developed in South America. So most of the grapes and the wines that we drink nowadays, they have their beginnings back in Europe. But Torrontés is, if not the only, one of the only Vitis vinifera, so wine grapes that was developed in the New World. So it was developed in, I believe, Argentina and produces really aromatic, really beautiful, almost sort of Riesling-like white wine in mostly Argentina. And I thought that was really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Geeky
and
too,
something different.
but
I
interesting.
know, that's me. So for our first topic today, from one of our favorite wine websites, daily750.com, back to my sort of love of science of wine, talking about the science of esters. And what are esters? And they are those fruity, aromatic compounds that when you stick your nose in a glass of a young, fresh wine, gives you all those really pretty, yummy, fruity smells. What did you take from this article, Mark?
I think it's funny. We always end up with the sciencey ones that you start
Thank
with, right?
goodness.
So, well, I love when we talk about wines that are aromatic. So, and it's all about these esters, and this is just the scientific thing of what is causing these aromas, what creates the aromas. So they were saying, interesting enough, the aromas from grapes are actually very few aromas. Or it's all generated from fermentation or malolactic fermentation or from aging that gives you these esters. So it was very interesting subject.
What I thought was very interesting about this, and something that I learned from reading this article, was that so many of these specific fruity aromas that you get when wines are very, very young really don't last very long, and that they are native to the grape instead of from this fermentation process. And so there are some things that really do disappear rather quickly, which makes sense to me, because we always tell people that white wines for certain grape varieties, if you want to really appreciate all those fruity flavors, you really want to drink them young, because they start to age out pretty quickly. And so this really showed us kind of the science behind why that happens. And when you think about things like tropical notes or citrus notes in certain wines, and aromatic wines like Albarino and Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc really came to mind here, that those are from the grape. But then after they get a little bit older, they sort of fall apart, and then you don't smell those aromas anymore. So I thought that was sort of fascinating.
Many times I'm thinking back, Kim, we had a Portuguese wine that you and I both liked. And then I remember one day saying to you, about an hour after you opened it, Kim, did the fruit just kind of die, like go away? And you agreed. So
yeah.
I think that's an excellent example of how this relates to the esters. After a while, sometimes it's just gone. It's for some reason, certain grape varietals. But I saw a few things where it said there's about 160 esters that are ID'd. And then I saw another article that said there's only about 11, but 83 of those are related to the actual effects from wine. So I'm kind of confused on, are they saying an ester is like, we have these charts about wine flavors and aromas. Those charts are huge.
They are.
So I guess the aromas and the esters have to be separated according to the geeky science part of it.
I think it's that esters are one potential aroma compound, but then there are other ones as well. So I like to tell people that fermentation plays such a big part in what we taste in a wine. Like if you were to have a cup of grape juice, just unfermented grape juice from, say, Malbec grapes that someone had pressed for you, and you're sticking your nose in that cup, versus a glass of Malbec, you are not going to smell nearly as much stuff out of that cup of grape juice than you will out of that glass of wine. Because yes, there are ester compounds that are present in that grape juice, but most of what you're going to be getting out of that glass of wine happens during fermentation. So fermentation releases all these other things because they recombine chemically and then produce all of these other compounds that then our noses are trying to put words to and recognize as something else. So fermentation adds to that complexity. So it really is more than just grape juice with alcohol in it. There are changes that take place during fermentation that affects the flavor, the color, and the aroma.
I liked how they said in this article that the esters should be called the wine's perfume, right? So it's all about the aroma.
And that's how we describe these wines sometimes. Describe them as perfumey, because a lot of times they have sort of floral notes to them too. So I sort of like this, putting together these ideas of wine and perfume, because there's a lot of overlap.
And they mentioned a lot of the scientific, like you had mentioned, Kim, the fermentation, the yeast, the alcohol, the acids, all...
Fermentation temperature, that's important.
All imparts different types of esters into a wine. So very geeky stuff.
Geeky stuff, but just keep that in mind when you have your next glass of wine. Even if you're not at a wine tasting, if you still want to get maybe a little bit more of, I'd say, cerebral enjoyment out of that glass of wine, give it a little sniff. Don't just throw your wine back. Smell it, pay some attention to what it tastes like, give it a little bit of thought, and your appreciation of that wine will only grow.
And you mentioned, Kim, the acids and the alcohol. They had talked about two types of ways that these esters get. You say in the aging, there's an enzyme interaction that leads to esters from aging, and they said there was a chemical that leads from the alcohol. So were you figuring out what they were kind of interpreting on that?
I think it's just more of those interactions. Yeah, because when fermentation takes place, it's not just one reaction. It's a bunch of different reactions. So it's not as simple as, hey, yeast eats sugar and then produces carbon dioxide and alcohol. It's a lot more complicated than that. And there are different byproducts that happen at different stages during the fermentation process, some of which are enzymatic and some of which are more microbial. So I think that that's what they were talking about, is that you're actually going through a whole bunch of little steps and then different things are produced at those different steps.
And you
Does
always
that make sense?
And you always hear aged wines, you're saying they're a bouquet, and young wines is an aroma. So I've never thought of it as the aged wines with esters. I always just think, there's a lot more happening with
and
ages.
I honestly, I don't think anybody ever thinks about it that way. I mean, some higher level professionals who do deal with these topics more on a daily basis than we do, I'm sure think about it fairly frequently. But for us, and even with those terms, aroma, bouquet, we do run across that differentiation in a lot of our readings. But when I'm having kind of a one-on-one conversation or in sort of a smaller class setting, I very rarely ever use the term bouquet anymore. I almost kind of feel like it's sort of old-fashioned-y. I don't know. What do you do you ever use?
No, I just like to say
even
that
when I have an older wine, I don't think that I use the term bouquet. Maybe I should use it a little bit more. But there are those layers. How do you describe a wine that is young and fresh and fruity, and then as it keeps changing, as it gets older, we have to come up with new terminology to describe those aromas because they are different from what the wine smells like when it's young.
But I probably would say I definitely use bouquet more than I do esters.
Yes.
So
I don't think I ever use esters. I probably do use esters every once in a while, but certainly not as frequently as aromas.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone. If you'd like to get more information about Kim, please go to her website at vinitaswineworks.com. If you'd like to get more information about myself, please go to franklinliquors.com. And to follow past episodes, please find us on iTunes at The Wonderful World of Wine. Next, we have another article from 750.com. And this, Kim, is right up your alley.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so hard to be a mom in the wine industry?
It's true. It's hard to be a mom in the wine industry.
Well,
I have 2 kids, so.
First off, I have to say, Kim, being a mom is the hardest job in the world. Never mind having a job while doing this
I don't
job.
think being a dad is a particularly easy task either.
It's interesting. A lot of talk lately about moms. It's not about working. It's about being a mom and needing a drink of wine because you're doing that mom work. But it never really says because you want to drink a wine because you're working and you're being a mom.
It's because you're trying to balance all of it. You're trying to balance the work part and the parenting part and making sure that you're there for your kids when they need you, but also you want to be present in your work situation as well. Obviously, we all want to do a good job at work. But this article really did ring true for me. I've been a parent in the wine industry, both in retail and in wholesale and in having my own company. And it's like I can compare it between I was in the wine industry before I had children, and obviously I'm in the wine industry now with young children. And it's hard, and it's hard in every industry, but the wine industry and hospitality industry in general does have its own set of challenges, as you are a parent who's also responsible for making sure that your kids have somebody there when they get off the school bus, and what the heck do you do during summer vacations? So yeah, it can be a challenge.
Well, there's 2 things on that, Kim. You were saying the industry itself, alcohol related. Now, were you ever pregnant and selling wine or working in wine?
Twice.
So obviously I know you didn't drink, right? And I see that a lot when a saleswoman would come in, she's pregnant and she has wine and she's telling me, oh, this is what I'm like, well, I know you didn't taste it, right?
I still smelled a lot of wine though. Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to get across. You still took part that way.
Yeah. When I was pregnant with my first son, and this was 11 years ago now, I was on the road. I had a wholesale job, and I still participated in our Friday meetings where we would be either introduced to new wines or would have tastings of stock that we had had for a while. And I would nose the wines. If I ever tasted them, I would just spit them right out. But I didn't do that all that often. But I did try to stay current with the things that we had because I always wanted to still be my good old professional self. But I would have to say that the most pushback I got was when I was conducting tastings. So not my interactions with my buyers and with my customers, but if I was, say, in one of my retail stores and I was pouring wine for people, I would get comments from people like, I shouldn't even be pouring wine for you. I'm like, I'm not drinking it.
Wow,
I'm not tasting it. But yeah, I got a lot of side eye doing that job. It wasn't quite as bad when I was actually working retail. I don't remember if I did a whole lot of pouring when I was pregnant with kid number 2. But I remember it did get physically tough being pregnant and working retail. I remember at one point I was super huge, my second kid, and I was trying to shelve bottles, and I was trying to like maneuver my gigantic body down to the wine shelf and shelf bottles. And that was when I was like, I think maternity leave needs to start soon because I physically could not do the job anymore. And it was necessarily like, oh boy, what am I doing with this gigantic belly? But yeah, so it was interesting being pregnant and working in the booze industry, I have to say.
I see that in retail. If a pregnant woman comes in and she's buying any alcohol, the first thing they'll say is, "This isn't for me."
Yeah.
People are so afraid that you're going to have this bad thought. So I can see how you got that.
And I felt like I was always defending myself. It's like, yes, okay, this is a short phase in my life. I'm not going to quit my job because I'm pregnant. So it was, not necessarily easy.
The other thing, besides it's an alcohol industry, it's the hours on a lot of these jobs in the industry. Like you said, doing tastings. They're not at 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning, or they're not what they would say mother hours or school hours, correct? So you're out at night. You have to attend these events. So you have to adjust schedule as well, correct?
And the hard thing for me for that one when I had little kids was daycare closed at 6. So even if I had a 9 to 5 job, that's still hard for working parents who have a traditional Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. If your daycare closes at 6 o'clock and you live an hour away, how are you getting there? It's difficult, I think, for any parent of young children to make it work with either a job with traditional hours or with non-traditional hours and trying to work within the frame of the school day that ends at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, depending on how old your kids are, or your daycare situation. So there's always a lot of interesting balance, I think, that has to go on. But I actually kind of felt like it was almost, the hours were almost a little bit easier with young children because I could work weekends and then have days of the week off. And then my husband would be with the kids on the weekends. So we really developed this very balanced parenting schedule, I guess you can say, where I was the alone parent with the kids for a couple days during the week. He was the alone parent with the kids over on the weekends. And I actually think that works really well for us because we didn't fall into that trap of, oh, mom takes over all the childcare duties. We still continue to have a very balanced way of watching over the kids because of my untraditional schedule. And my untraditional schedule sort of continues nowadays. So out a lot of nights. So the kids are home with my husband a lot of nights. So you kind of, work with
a good opportunity too for that type of schedule. There are a lot of jobs that moms can take part of in the wine industry. You can do those home wine events, wine clubs. You can do retail work. You can do in-store tastings. So there are a lot of part-time jobs in the industry,
especially if you don't have a problem with working on the weekends.
Yeah, if you have coverage, like you said.
Yep. So if you do have either a partner who is going to be covering a lot of the childcare for when you are at work, or if you're grandparents or neighbors, or we all try to make it work.
So as far as other positions for women in general in wine, it was mentioned 10% of wineries in the United States have women winemakers. 10%.
That's really low.
Really small.
That's really
it seems like we always see an article promoting women in wine. My personal view on it is when I go to wine events, and you may be seeing this as well, Kim, I see more women now in the industry than I have 10 years ago.
Yeah, it definitely is growing. And I actually mentioned this last week that I had my sales route. We had, I think 35 salespeople. Only 6 of us were female. And that definitely has grown. And that was about 10 years ago. We see a lot of women working on the importer side, definitely more on the distribution side. So that is changing. Just like you just said, when I go to trade tastings, a lot of folks that are representing their wineries or representing their import company are women. So that moves, I think, right in a good direction. I am seeing more winery folks who are women, like you said, winery owners. And this article did point out that a lot of the newer graduates from University of California at Davis are women. It's like 63% of most recent graduating classes have been women. So now we are starting to see that from the technical side, we've made some good advances in the industry, and maybe it's just that it takes a long time for the rest of the industry to catch up.
Yeah,
but it's changing.
In general, we see a lot of women in our education classes and our club events.
Oh, yeah.
So I can see interest is there.
And I sort of have found that women are a little more open-minded about learning about new topics. And there's a lot of enthusiasm, I feel like, from our female participants. And I suppose it's a little bit of a stereotype, but it does seem like men know what they know and they don't want to be confronted with the idea that maybe they don't know some stuff. So there's a hesitation there to want to put themselves. And I also think it's a social activity. Women are much more, I guess, conditioned to be comfortable in more social situations where, you're going to go out with your girlfriends. You're going to have a book club. You're going to do a wine thing. You're going to go to a winery just because it's a fun thing to do with your girlfriends. I don't think that a lot of men have those outlets. So we're kind of lucky in that regard that, those sorts of things are a little bit more acceptable. But we do see way more women in our classes than we do men. Come on, guys, come on out to the wine classes.
Yeah, really. Well, what am I saying? I like the women. One of the things, Kim, it's always mentioned in the wine industry is women have a much better palate than men. So anytime a woman says to me, if you tell me
has that been scientifically proven?
As far as I'm concerned, it has been, because we had that woman who took the sommelier exam. They did an MRI. We talked about this in the past.
Yeah,
they MRI'd her brain, and she was actually activating parts of her brain.
Did they MRI a guy too, or was it just this one?
They didn't, but
that's just one example.
I would assume they were comparing it to a normal brain, which
I don't know. But that might just be her. That might not have anything to do with the fact that she's a female. She might just be exceptional.
Yeah, that would have been a better test for a guy and side by side and see what they were both activated. But yeah, so women in the wine world and moms, they give you a lot of credit, Kim, for doing that.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We are your hosts, Mark and Kim. For more information about Mark, you can go to his website, franklinliquors.com. And for more information about myself, you can go to vinitaswineworks.com. And for past episodes of our show, please find us on iTunes at The Wonderful World of Wine. The next topic we want to discuss is wine labels, which is a topic that we come back to fairly often, but a different spin on them this time. Is less really more on a wine label, or do consumers want more information telling them more about the specifics about that wine that they're buying? And I thought this was interesting because it's almost like the title was a little misleading, because when I think of less on a wine label, I'm thinking of some of those like higher end California wines where they don't even tell you the name of the wine on the front. It's just like some abstract picture, and there's a little bit of information on the back, and you really sort of have to go digging as to what this wine is all about. But they're actually talking about more specific appellations. And do wine labels need to convey more information about more specific site in order for consumers to understand more about the wines? And I'm kind of seeing this more as a difference between sort of more international styles and then more traditional wines from Europe. What was your take on this, Mark?
Yeah, I had the same thing. It was raising a debate if it's a brand only on the label or it's the region on the label. And when you think of a region on the label, you're always thinking European, old world, where this is the place, so you should know the grape. So I guess the debate is, do you want to know all that detail, or just this is the brand?
And I think it's hard when, the wine buying public can be so very different. There are people out there who only want like a basic little bit of information. It's from California, it's made from Chardonnay. Boom, I'm done. I know what I'm getting. Or there are some people who have a little bit more of that background knowledge, who want to look at that label and have them tell them a little bit more information about it. Like, oh, this is from Chablis, and therefore I know that it is a dry, unoaked Chardonnay. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So I think a lot of it does depend on who is the audience, who is the market that these labels are being put out there for. Who are they trying to get to buy their wines? And this whole idea of brand and branding, I think, is very important, because for at least when I think about wines and wine brands, sometimes it's not just like the branding of like Apple and Microsoft and Nike. It's not just those brands, but regions can also sort of come across as a brand. And we talk about Prosecco all the time. That's a style of wine that has sort of taken off with a life of its own and is almost kind of like a brand. So I think for wine, there are a lot of gray areas where people might recognize one term, but not another term, and what information on that label is the most valuable to a consumer.
Yeah, brands and wineries, they have to decide. I mean, Prosecco got lucky. People, it's a brand,
right.
And they
and
know.
Champagne
they
is
know
the
it.
same way, and I kind of like it, sparkling wine,
Yeah, sparkling. Well, less information a lot of times helps sell, and it's proven. Like it was mentioned in this article, the Germans. If you look at a German wine label, it's probably the most confusing in the wine
complicated
world. So they just simplified it, so because they knew the consumers, especially the American consumer, wanted simply to tell me what is in here. It's Riesling. It's from this area. That's it. They didn't care about the single vineyard, the single appellation, whatever. So they did studies on that, and that's what's sold.
Yeah.
That's what's selling people.
I think it's a very small percentage of the wine buying population that is going to dig into that nitty gritty on the label and really understand what all of that info is telling you. Like 5 or 10% maybe of the wine buying public would look at a German label and be like, oh, I understand what that's telling me. But the rest of the population that is out there looking to buy a wine probably sees all that and it's just gobbledygook. And it can be very, very confusing.
And you mentioned the Prosecco, Kim. I think a lot of the big brands, like a Mock West. When you see Mock West now, what's the first thing you think about? If you saw Mock West on a label,
Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir, right? You don't even care it says Pinot Noir because that brand is just known for Pinot Noir.
Right.
So I think if those powerful brands like that, they should take advantage of that marketing. But if you're a small guy and you want to get on the shelf, maybe more information in this case is better.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your winery.
Funny side note on this. Another brand besides Mark West that does this and does this very, very well is Oyster Bay. And everybody sort of knows Oyster Bay Sauvignon Blanc. It's New Zealand. It's on like a gajillion wine lists. I went over to a friend's house and she had wine open on the counter and I saw Oyster Bay. And without even thinking, I just assumed it was Sauvignon Blanc.
Was it Pinot Gris
It
or
was
something?
Chardonnay.
Chardonnay, yeah.
And I took one sip and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, what's going on?
This isn't my wine. It
It's
was
funny.
really
Yeah,
funny.
yes.
And I don't feel like I get tricked all that often. I totally got tricked. So,
People, when they
thank you,
ask
Christina.
when they ask for Oyster Bay, it's like, yeah, you want Sauvignon Blanc, right? And they're like, that's it, right?
Like,
Yeah.
duh.
But they do, and they make Pinot Noir as well. But yeah, that's interesting.
So I was totally, I was totally taken unawares, and that branding thing, they've done such a good job with branding themselves as oyster-based Sauvignon Blanc that I was completely tricked.
So this is about is less better on a label. And you had mentioned at first about these cult wines where it might just have an initial, or you have to be well known. And in that case, people, they don't really care because they know the brand. But for me, I think lately trending has been give more information, and it's based more on the location. Tell me more about the location.
And that's exactly what this article is saying, is that is this direction that labeling is going, where you're getting more and more specific on the label as far as the region. Is this a good thing? Is this not a good thing? So you are seeing this trending.
More and more information being put out. And we the bad part, I guess, about this is we had an article in the past where the gentleman was putting more and more false information and got in trouble and had to take his wine off the shelves. But I think it gives you a lot that you can, when you see a bottle, and if there is a lot on there, the good thing for me about it is buy it, take it home, and research that information that's on the bottle. It can be fun while you're drinking it and to research what all that is.
And it's nice, if you are in the store and you have time, pull out your cell phone and Google some of those terms on the label that you might not understand, whether it's a single vineyard or whether it's a region of France that you've never heard of before. Yay for the power of Google, because you can find everything. And even if it's something as simple as going to Wikipedia, because like every grape variety has a Wikipedia entry, every single wine region in the world, Wikipedia will tell you a little bit something about that wine region. So there's lots and lots of information at our fingertips that can help you with your buying.
If you're a label shopper, we talk about this all the time too, is people buy based on a label. If you're walking up to a label and there's a monkey on it and you buy it because there's a monkey, research, because many times it's a trick. I've had this before where a gentleman's told me there was a Sauvignon Blanc called Monkey Bay Sauvignon Blanc, and a lot of people were buying it because the monkey on the Sauvignon Blanc. And I had a New Zealand winemaker come to me and says, we're so upset about this because there's absolutely no monkeys.
New monkeys in New Zealand.
Right? But people are buying this like crazy. I mean, you buy Yellowtail because of the little kangaroo. Obviously, there's kangaroos.
But that's branding.
But when you buy a label like that because of a graphic or something, research why it's on there. Many times it's significant to the winery, why that logo or something like that. I mean, Sandeman Port with the gentleman with the cape has to do with the history of port and the cape and the Portuguese culture. So research it and have fun.
And it's, it kind of ties back into this whole idea of wine as storytelling. A lot of smaller wineries or bigger wineries or historic wineries, like they have stories to tell. There are reasons why they make make the wines they do. There are reasons why they are where they are. That winery could have been in the same family for hundreds of years, and I find that stuff to be really fascinating. And it really can tie what you're eating and drinking with the larger world. And people want to know where their food comes from. People are really into, if you shop at the farmer's market, you want to know who's growing your food, a lot more with like local eggs and local produce and things. And wine can be just as much of a tie to the producer as food products. So yeah, a little research can take you a long way.
Thank you for listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We've been your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone. We've been exploring all things wine with you. If you'd like to get more information on our show, please find us on iTunes at The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are also on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Cheers.